We're going to open the meeting of the Clifton Heights Zoning Board for the month of July 2024. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So let's go, you turn your microphones on so we'll be on the record. Switch my
Yep.
microphone.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. The next order of business is I'm going to take a roll call of the Clifton Heights Zoning Board. I'll start with Miss Michelle Hartel.
Michelle Hartel, 317 Harrison Avenue, Clifton Heights.
Okay. Mr. Eric Gantz.
Eric Gantz, 123 West Berkeley Avenue, Clifton Heights.
Michael Humphreys, 35 Arch Street, Clifton Heights, Pennsylvania. Joe Lombardo.
Joseph Lombardo, 33 West Baltimore Avenue, Clifton Heights, PA.
And Miss Jen Trout.
Jennifer Trout, 213 North Oak Avenue, Clifton Heights.
And the solicitor at the table.
Yes, good evening. For the record, Ernest Angelos, attorney ID number 207-403, standing in on behalf of Adam Medlowski, the board's normal solicitor.
Okay. And over here is John Gould, our zoning officer.
Thank you.
All right. I'll leave it to you to do the housework right now.
Fair enough. We are here this evening on two applications, both of which happen to be the same applicant. The first is the property of 1517 East Baltimore Avenue, Clifton Heights. And they are asking in connection with the proposed use of the property for a party equipment rental and supply business, rental office space, and residential units in the C1 commercial district. Applicant requests variances from the following borough zoning ordinances. 1, section 340-67 and 68, which requires additional parking where a change in use mandates same where none is proposed to be provided. 2, section 340-69 and 70, which requires space for off-street loading and unloading where none is proposed to be provided. 3, section 340-70, which requires setbacks and screenings from adjacent residential areas where none is proposed to be provided. 4, 340-40, which does not allow residential use by right in the C1 district and limits to one use. And 5, 340-61, to allow a signage larger than permitted by ordinance. The second property, which is noticed as 7-9 Baltimore Pike, but I believe is actually 9-11 Baltimore Pike. So we'll just make sure that both of them are on for the record. Again, this application is in connection with the proposed use of the property for a party equipment rental and supply business, rental office space, and residential units in the C1 commercial district. Applicant requests variances from the following borough zoning ordinances. They are the same as the requests for 15-17, but I'll read them anyway unless the board says otherwise. 1 is section 340-67 and 68, which requires additional parking where a change in use mandates same where none is proposed to be provided. 2, section 340-69 and 70, which requires space for off-street loading and unloading where none is proposed to be provided. 3, section 340-70, which requires setbacks and screenings from adjacent residential areas where none is proposed to be provided. 4, section 340-40, which does not allow residential use by right in the C1 district and limits to one use. Finally, 5, section 340-61, to allow signage larger than permitted by ordinance. I do know, for the record, if I may just add or at least admit a couple exhibits for purposes of notification. I would submit first that Exhibit B1 be the two applications that were submitted by the applicant.
Okay.
B2 be the public notice in the Delaware County Daily Times, which was published on June 11th and June 18th. B3 is the postings that the zoning officer has posted both at Borough Hall and on the property. We have various photos evidencing proof of that. And then I'd just like to note that all of the residents within a 500-foot radius were provided notice of this evening's hearing.
Correct. That was done on June 10th, 2024 by myself.
Okay. Well, the board have any objections with accepting that? The notices, all right. Anybody against? All those for?
Aye.
Aye, okay. If they're submitted.
Thank you.
The next up is to ask Mr. Smalls to speak, I think.
Yes, I think the way to do it, and if the board decides a different direction, maybe we have the applicant identify himself
Yes.
for the record, and then I see that Mr. McBlain is here.
Mhm.
We'll have Mr. McBlain identify himself and also who he represents, and then it would be the applicant's turn to proceed with their case in chief.
Okay.
You need me to
Yeah,
stand or-
if you could just go and introduce yourself and your address.
Yeah, all right. My name is Dwayne Smalls, and this is my wife, Mardia Smalls. We live currently at 35 North Church Street. We've been there since 2006. This is where we live.
Okay.
This is our neighborhood, love it. We had the opportunity to raise 4 girls here in
Mhm.
our school district,
Okay.
all graduated, 1 honors.
Okay.
One right now, I have one that's
Okay,
going.
1 second, not to interrupt you. I want to let
Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
McBlain introduce himself for the record. Okay?
Good evening, Mr. and
Yeah,
Mrs. Falls
yeah.
and members of the board. John McBlain, Supreme Court number 65287, here representing the Borough of Clifton Heights as solicitor. We would like to join as a party to this proceeding this evening.
Okay.
Do you understand what Mr. McBlain is asking for?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Now, technically, the borough would have an automatic right to be a party, but he's here requesting that status, so.
All right.
So,
Okay,
like I
okay.
said, this is our neighborhood. We love here. We love being here. One of the things that we've seen over the years is we've driven by this building numerous times. My wife and I said, hey, well, we've been kind of circulating we call it the CUC corridor, between Collindale, Upper Darby, and Clifton. We have businesses in various locations in those addresses or neighborhoods. We are looking to do something here as well as be a part of what the business district is going to start looking like. I'm sure as Johnny knows, other guys did a great job with bringing some of the businesses back to the corridor. Baltimore Pike is a main artery to a lot of the business districts. So we thought it would only be fitting to take, it may not be a historical building for a lot of people, but it has a lot of character. When we looked at the building, immediately we fell in love with it. So, hey, we got some great ideas for it. I know some of it may not be something that the borough may want, but we were open or are open to what will fit in this particular area. If you look at, I guess the one that's closer to you, LB9, we were looking to make that a co-op center. We do, GWAB is part of a financial planning business that deals with credit repair, financial planning, bookkeeping, tax preparation, those type of things.
On that issue is your applications, you're referring to the application that's 132, the property at 132. I mean, on the application that your wife will be having her business out of, which I just want to be specific, which building, as you can see on the monitor, you have the one which is 7 through 9, and then you have 15 through 17. So the 15 through 17 is the application 132, correct?
So that parcel right there that you're looking at, that's directly next to Yummy's, would be considered 9-11.
And that would be the commercial property that your wife would like
That's
to,
correct.
okay, all right. I just want to be,
Maybe make a suggestion, because I know that in the conversations and in correspondence, it's been identified, that typically 9 East Baltimore is the, what used to be, you'll hear the old sewing machine.
Right.
Property, the old commercial space right next to Yummy's. 11 perhaps has typically been identified as the former residential property where the owner of the sewing machine was. So that's 9-11. And then immediately next door, 15 would be, again, the commercial frontage to the property that was the continuation of the sewing machine store. And 17 would refer to a 3-unit apartment building, or 3-bedroom apartment building, or 3-bedroom apartment that is towards the rear of that building. So 9, one part of the old sewing machine store, 11, the residence that used to be associated with the sewing machine store, 15, the storefront that was the extension of the sewing machine store, and 17 is the apartment in the rear of 15.
Another thing is that you said that 7 through 9 and 15 through 17. In your picture is up here. They're completely separated. There's no going through these buildings, correct?
No.
Okay, so, all right. So I wanted to make sure. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify because there's so much on this,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to be sure which building.
It's a unique, it's a unique property.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is why, I don't know the whole history of it, but again, like we just saw great character, great potential in this building, which is why we pursued it.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Smalls?
That's all I have.
Okay.
Do you have any exhibits or anything that you want to submit or be made part of the record?
The only thing that we've, as far as I think we've, it should be site plans there, but that kind of just gives an outline of basically what the layout is. I don't actually have the actual pictures of 9, but that is completed as far as the office space. 15 is just a shell. We haven't done anything there to do anything with that. The apartment that was already an apartment. The house was already a house. The house, we did no renovations, so that's just, again, it's just sitting idle. The 3-bedroom apartment was actually, we went in just painting, doing like the basic things in there. I think the only thing that was done, that was updated was the bathroom because there was some issues there with the existing bathroom. So that was just the only thing. Regular flooring, that kind of stuff was done.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
When, I do have a deed here when it was the 21st of October, you went to, so it's, okay. And the property has been, John, can you help me on this? How long has that property been abandoned?
Mr. Hayes owned it, who ran the sewing machine.
No,
operation.
since there's not been any occupancy in
I
it.
understand he left around the year 2000, that the business left.
Okay.
Approximately year 2000.
And was it a gradual withdrawal from the community, or was it like upstairs? Was it occupied, or, and those buildings, both of them, were they occupied in 2020?
In 2020, they were not occupied, no.
Do you have, like, the last time it was occupied? Could you know?
I don't. I started conversation with Mr. Hayes about 2018 when I started.
Thank you.
Employing here to deal with the vacant properties. At that point, they were vacant in 2018 when I started.
Ms. Hartel, we will present testimony. So, I mean, I know that there's probably a lot of questions, but I do have questions for Mr. and Mrs. Smalls, and then we'll present Mr. Gould testimony. So there is a lot of information still to come.
The other, I mean, I know I'm going all over because this is all over anyway. And the thing is that right now, how many designated parking spaces do they have in the rear? Or, I mean, I don't know where.
Currently, there is 3.
For each unit or one unit?
So the 3-bedroom would be a single family dwelling. So they would only be reserved for one vehicle. The house, again, would only be for one particular family. That require, I'm assuming that would require one parking space.
But the business, as I understand, John, A commercial property needs how many designated parking spaces?
That's determined by the use of the property. So once the use is determined, we can do a proper calculation on that.
Okay,
For residential, for a 3-bedroom dwelling unit, 3 bedrooms or more requires 3 parking spaces.
and that would be for the part that is 7 through 9, correct?
Correct. That would basically be for each residence. We
Right.
require 3 parking spaces by the zoning code.
Okay.
So based on Mr. McBlain, just to be clear on the record, that would be 11, which was the residence that was associated with the sewing, and then 17, which was the 3-bedroom residence. Is it correct?
Correct. Both of those were formerly used as residences. I think, again, well, there's testimony to be presented about the abandonment of that use.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So with that, if I may, I don't know if you
Are you
did
done?
some more testimony that you wanted to present?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is where I think a lot of things went kind of south. When we went to purchase the property, I guess I will put it this way. We probably skipped a couple steps. We missed some things that we should have had an attorney actually go over. But what wasn't disclosed to us was that those were abandoned use. We, based on the documents that they submitted at closing at Sage, was that those were occupied, that those will be able to be occupied based on what they submitted to them. They also submitted PICO records and all these other kind of things that they had. What they did not state to us was that this was an abandoned property. We understood the storefront, and I really wasn't, we wasn't under, really under distress about the commercial piece of it because we would take our time. But to go into a plan where we didn't think that we would not be able to use a residential unit right away, we wouldn't have walked into that deal. We would have actually negotiated that even further.
Mr. Small, was it a hardship for you when you bought the property, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this, but was it demanded that like you purchased, it wasn't subdivided, like you had to purchase both properties?
Yes.
They wouldn't sell one without the other? Okay.
I just want to clear one thing up if I could for record. You had indicated you had like a plan or something that you sketch or something that you included in your application.
Damon engineer.
'Cause I don't see that. I didn't see. I saw that there was now the application's already admitted as part of the board's exhibit, but there's a deed that obviously gives you standing for this evening to appear here. And then there looks to be proposed plans, one for a 6-bedroom house, one I think is for you. Is it your wife's business?
Mhm.
And then there's a proposed layout for that with
signage.
Yes.
But I didn't see
So we.
a sketch plan.
We're actually not gonna go with that, only, what we're gonna, if you see it over there now, but we just used the co-op in the actual window. So that's all the signage that's gonna be used there. On 15, it's gonna be those channel letters, kind of like what you see, over here at the corner of Springfield and, Baltimore, where it says Clifton Heights at. Those type of letters we're gonna use at the top of 15, on top of this one. Yeah,
Okay.
those same letters that you guys have here is kind of the. And that's actually in the drawing on 15.
Now, you mentioned you had a site plan that Dave Damon prepared.
Yes.
I don't have that. I don't know if the board does.
No.
Site plan was not in the
No,
application.
no, there's no site plan in the application. Okay?
Do you have a copy that you'd like to submit?
Drop off a copy on.
Is it an existing site plan or is it a proposed site? It's an existing site plan? Okay. Not a proposed, right?
No.
Okay. I think everybody's got a rough idea as to what the existing building is, so I don't think it's, I don't want to tell you what you would do, but I don't think it's probably necessary.
Okay. Are you done, Mr. Smalls, or would you like to give some more testimony?
Like, again, this has been like a 3-year process.
Okay,
And a lot of it is I'll take responsibility for it. It was just things that we didn't anticipate. I'm going to be quite frank with that. I just didn't anticipate a lot of this. I thought we would be able to at least have the residential units to be able to occupy those immediately. Wasn't able to do that. And that has created a problem.
okay,
But with that being said, again, we don't want to just live in Clifton. We want to be contributors here. So this is for us. This is what we want to. This is what we are. Prepared to do. It's not something that we want to just kind of just scratch off the table. This building is definitely going to be a landmark
okay,
at some point in time in Clifton. So
okay.
that's all I have to say about that.
All right, does Mrs. Smalls have anything to say? No? All right, I'm going to go to Mr. McLean now.
Thank you. I do have some questions
Okay.
for Mr. Smalls. Mr. Smalls, prior to you purchasing the property, did you inspect the property?
We actually did I think we submitted the application to have it.
I'm sorry, I'm not referring to having the borough inspect the property, but you as a prospective purchaser of the property, when it was offered for sale, did you do a walkthrough of the property?
We actually did a walkthrough. We went through the 2 commercial spaces. We went through the house, and we actually went through the apartment. The house at the time had panel, like it was okay. It wouldn't have been where I would want somebody to live in that way. I would want to fix up as if I'm living here. Right? So,
Well, when you went through the 11 East Baltimore, which was the former house,
right.
You saw that there was nobody occupying that property.
Correct.
Right. And when you went through 17, which is the 3-unit apartment, you saw that there was nobody occupying that property.
No, but under the documents that they submitted for closing, they gave us records of the equipment being serviced. They gave us, basically that it was being maintained. Outside, the facade didn't look maintained. On the inside, they looked like they were being maintained for the most part.
Yeah, and when you saw the property prior to the time you purchased it, is it correct that from the outside it was boarded up?
Yes. Now it was like,
Yeah,
kind of
like
that. In the back, it was just on the debris.
And do you have any documents that show that there was in any way anybody occupying any of the former residential properties? Now, the deeds that you submitted were dated on October 27th, 2021, but those weren't recorded, or it wasn't recorded with the county recorder of deeds until late December of 2021. Is that right?
Right. And I don't know why that was that.
And in the meantime, you began to have conversations with the borough and with Mr. Gould regarding what could be what could go there.
Right.
And you and the seller made application for use and occupancy certificates at the time. But am I correct to say you didn't follow through with those?
No.
And Mr. Gould, you continued to have conversations with Mr. Gould, and do you remember receiving a letter from Mr. Gould dated December the 7th, 2021, that was 9 pages long, that explained what you could or could not do with the property and what the zoning issues would be for what you explained to him you wanted to use it for?
As far as the commercial spaces, yes, I did receive information about that. As far as the residential, that was not what was explained. We were said, especially the apartment, because I really wasn't focused on all the other pieces. It was more so just getting the apartment occupied and used, which we thought smack some paint up and we'll be good to go. I even went as far as like to try to just knock out the trees that was in the back, try to fix the facade, make it look a little bit better in the back. Because it didn't look like a residential space.
But you agree with me that Mr. Gould did write you that letter
I
of
did.
December 7th, 2021. It was very lengthy and sort of spelled out what could and couldn't happen based upon the conversations that you had with him and what you told him what you wanted to use it for.
Yes.
And subsequent to that, you didn't make any applications for use and occupancy for any residential there?
Just the apartment. That was the only one that we made a request for.
And when was that?
I want to say it was probably 3 weeks after our closing. Because we did a pre-inspection. Again, this is just what we were thinking after the pre-inspection was done, and we didn't even know violations was on there. If I would have known that those violations were there, we would not have actually went to closing. I would have actually asked for us to sit down and redo that contract, because that many violations, that would take years. And as you see, it's taking years.
Well, and as we said, there was an application made for use and occupancy for a transfer inspection, but you didn't follow through with that.
No.
Right. The proposed uses of the property, I want to make sure we're clear what we're talking about, because there have been a lot of different ideas, right?
Yes.
So right now, for 9 East Baltimore, the proposal is to use it in conformity with the commercial district zoning and have it as professional offices for your wife's business for taxes, financial, and that sort of thing. And that would be under single use.
That would be a single use, correct? Yes.
And that's a permitted use under the zoning to do that. Yeah. The 6-unit, the former 6-unit house that, as you can see, and you can agree with me that one time there was a house there and it looks like they sort of many years ago built around the house and sort of enclosed it. That house, is it correct that that leads directly down into the business? No.
It did at one point, yes.
It did at one point.
Correct.
Did you close it off?
Yes.
Okay. So when you purchased it, that was, the house and the business were all connected.
Right.
And then for the, and your proposed use for the house would be for a single family?
Correct.
And at some point you had closed off the front entrance to the former house. Is
Yes.
that right?
But if you talk about this front here,
Yeah, and that's reflected in the picture that we see from Google Earth that's up there.
right?
Next to where that square orange is, there used to be a doorway there and you had sealed it
No, so
off.
it wasn't a door there. It's where you would have to actually walk through that brown door there, now orange actually. When you walk through that, then there's it's like a small corridor, but in that corridor was a door that led into the house.
Okay.
So that door was just closed off, but it wasn't an exterior outside of the actual business area where you can walk directly into the house.
Okay. And 11 or 9, 11, I'm sorry, 15, that right now is proposed to be used as a party or event rental.
Correct.
All right.
Equipment.
So you're not planning on having events there?
No.
That's not proposed to be a venue where people would come to for parties or anything of the like? Would the equipment be stored at that property?
It will.
Right. So the idea would be if I want to have a big birthday party for my wife, I could rent a lot of the stuff from you. Do I have to come and pick it up?
No. So we would actually, I should have put a picture of the back. The back is, right now, currently, there's a black fence back there. So we would actually take away part of that black fence, extend the you want to make it a blacktop area. But then we'll put a garage door that will kind of, like right where that green, right there, John, right, yep, right there is where the garage bay door would go in that space.
So right now, there's, so somebody would have to go there. The only parking that you have on your property, again, we're looking at that Google Earth picture, and there's a silver car,
Yeah, what is that?
and then, I'm sorry, go back, please.
Yeah,
There's a silver car, and then there's several spaces next to it, correct?
Right.
So that's the only parking that's associated with any of these properties,
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
So you're talking about that if you were to create a space to do loading or unloading of equipment, it would have to go through one of those parking spaces to get, and you'd have to take down that black fence to get to the rear door of 15 in order to pick up the equipment.
So I don't know if you can see that little gray area there. That would actually just kind of go back or recess back a little bit, but we won't be taking away those particular. So right now there's like where that gray car is, there's a spot, and there's like a pole that's not present there now, but there's a Pico pole that's there, and then another parking space there. But then there's another space that would be able to back up, say, a 6x12 trailer if we had to load the equipment onto that. And you will still have the stairs. That gray little area is the actual stairs that go down into the door. So you still have that entryway too, to get in and out of the building.
So what types of equipment, would it be you doing the transportation of the equipment?
So we would have a team of people that we would hire as far as like, taking.
So you were somebody that you would hire, and would they be using trucks?
We would have either, I think we want to probably start out with like an enclosed landscape trailer, like a 6x12, but eventually we want to get like a small box truck.
So that small box truck would have to back up through, and you agree with me, that's the public parking lot is the only access to your parking.
Yeah.
So the box truck would have to go through the public parking lot, back up through some of the existing parking spaces in order to get to the rear of 15. And would people be coming to the 15 to do planning for the party?
Yeah, so in the front, there will be where that white door is.
Mhm.
That door there is where they will actually enter. There will be a small corridor space where they could actually look through some of the books and things, and that's sort of what they may want. It'll be a wall behind that where everything will be housed or stored. So there'd be like racks that will hold the chairs, the chafers,
Sure.
all that kind of stuff right back there.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ansel, just for record purposes, I guess, since we have been looking at images of Google Map on the screens that are in the meeting room here, I'd ask that a hard copy of the picture from the front showing both properties be marked as Borough Exhibit 1, and then the picture from the rear that shows that rear entrances that we were just looking and discussing be marked as Borough Exhibit 2. And we'll print those out, and I would ask that they be made part of the record.
Okay. Any objections? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, okay.
Any objection on your part to have that entered in the record?
All right.
So there, and then the last unit, the 17, was the 3 apartments in the rear of 15. You said you would be wanting to provide just one parking space?
Correct.
All right. You understand that under the code, there's 3 parking spaces that are required for a three unit bedroom. And that for the 6-unit residential, you would also be required to have at least 3 parking spots. Before we even get to the commercial use of the property, do you have any idea, have you calculated, like I said, you indicated Mr. Damon did a plan, although unfortunately we don't have a copy of that. If you look at the zoning code, were you aware that you would need parking additionally for both commercial uses based upon the square footage? No? You don't believe that there's any parking required for either of the commercial uses?
I mean, I was not aware, but now I am aware.
Can I ask a question too? Is that where you designated where you would bring your box truck up? Would that omit the parking spaces that are actually there? Since, I mean, where are the trucks gonna be that are supposed to, are they gonna be on the premises is what I'm gonna say? Like, if you're not in music,
No, so, and that's the thing.
so that the trucks wouldn't be
No.
parked there
We
at
have-
night?
We have another lot.
Okay.
that we
So then that space would be,
Open for those that live there. Only time we would need to use the space is when we have to unload and load.
So we talked about the apartment. Now, while we have what is Exhibit B2 up on the screen, you would agree with me that what is sort of in the top center there is the former garage and storage area for the old sewing machine shop.
No, yeah.
And you constructed a deck. Yeah, and you constructed a residence above the garage. And as you know now, you did that without permits or without any sort of permission. And it was occupied for a period of time until the borough enforced the regulations. What are you asking that be used for at this point in time?
So we would like to have it used in conjunction with the office space in the front as a library area for study. Conference center for a lot of the things that my wife do pretty much is done virtual anyway. So, but there will be a conference center in underneath where it's hard to see it from that, but underneath the deck is a door that goes into the bottom of the building. That's where the conference center will be. The library will be on the second floor where the deck space is and the white double doors.
So that would actually be an expansion of the commercial space that you're proposing. And you'd agree with me that previously it was used for garage space, for parking. It was a garage
I was a
before.
garage. Yeah. It was just stuff.
Yeah, I understand. I'll withdraw that because you weren't around back when it was last used in last century. So but you would agree with me that before you did the upstairs, you built the upstairs onto it, and before you built the deck, which we understand was done without permits or permission, what was existent there was the garage.
Yes.
can I ask you a question on this one? Was there utilities in there? Was there water running and electricity?
It
When
was
were-
electricity in there, yes.
But
There was no water, no.
were there walls or was it a garage was it cinder blocks or did you develop it?
No, what you see structure wise is there. There was nothing structurally changed that building.
Well, John, they just said that you put a
I
deck
mean,
on there, so,
the deck was the only thing that was.
and the inside it had electricity and water going on in there?
Not water, it had electricity. It had
Oh,
some meter and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I
Stairs-
just wanted to know if there were
yeah, it had
utilities
stairs.
and,
Yeah. it did have
Okay.
utilities.
so you ran the water line or there was a water line already
There
there?
was no water line in there.
And
It
you
was a-
ran the water line in?
We did,
Okay, thank you.
It was always 2 stories.
yes.
Um,
Can I ask Mr. Gould a question?
Mhm.
If they took that garage down, how many additional parking spaces do you think it would give them? Would it give them the relief that they would need for those parking spaces?
That would be between 2 and 4 spots, depending on how they were laid out. I'm trying to
I mean,
get
could you get, you could get maybe 6 cars in there, I would think, because it's deep. You could get two and two,
I would agree with that, yes.
or, you would have room to park your truck. I mean, I know you probably don't want to hear that, but that would give you your relief for your parking issue anyway. And it would give you somewhere to park your truck.
I would point out to the board, at this point, I don't, we'll ask Mr. Gould. I'm not sure that we can make a determination about the number of required parking spaces because we don't know, there hasn't been a plan
For
presented.
the commercial
Okay,
space.
okay.
Right.
Commercial space. So we know
for-
for the proposed use,
Right,
you need at least 6.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus whatever the commercial space would require,
right.
which has not been calculated yet
Sure,
because
sure,
we don't
sure.
have a plan for it.
No, I'm just, and I know
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's a starting. I mean, it would give you some relief for the parking and your issues, for somewhere to keep your truck and all that kind of stuff.
So, Mr. McBlain, if, as it relates to the commercial uses, if there hasn't been a calculation, because there hasn't been a plan submitted yet, how can this board grant variances when we don't know what the actual requirements will be and how many spaces they have?
It's more a question for Mr. Smalls. I mean, from our standpoint, they're not proposing any additional parking, so what they're asking for is just what you see is what you get. Whether there's 6 required or whether there's 12 required after you include the commercial, we don't know, but they don't meet any of that. So it's their burden to present that hardship to the board. But let me just ask a little bit more about the residential use, and I'm getting kind of close to my end here. Do you have a copy of the applications that you submitted to the board, the zoning applications? There?
I did not bring this.
If I can show you, and these have been made part of the record with the board exhibits.
Yeah.
Would you agree that
132.
these are both copies, and I'm sorry, you can.
That's 130. Got it?
Yeah, these are copies of the 2 applications that were submitted that are being the subject of the application here this evening.
Okay.
Right. And if we turn to the second page, and you filled this out yourself, correct? Under question 10A, for variance, you have indicated that abandoned use by the previous owner, correct?
Yeah.
On both of those.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
I think that's all the questions I have at this time for Mr. Small.
Okay, is that it? All right. I'm gonna go to, what would the next line of business now be?
Well, first I want to indicate that obviously this is being recorded. I meant to do this in the beginning. I didn't see a court reporter there, but I believe this is being recorded and a transcript can be dictated from this. If Mr. McBlain has rested his case,
Yeah.
not yet.
I'm sorry, yeah, no.
Okay,
I
just
think
on
this-
those questions.
Right,
Question.
that
Got
was
it.
my cross-examination of
Okay.
Mr. Small.
Got it.
All right,
Okay, so at this point, Mr. McBlain can then proceed with his case in chief.
okay,
Unless Mr. Smalls has any response
Yeah.
based on the questions that I asked.
all right. You have anything you would like to
No
ask?
response.
Mr. McBlain? No, okay.
So if there's no further presentation by the applicant, I would call to witness John Gould, the Borough Zoning Officer. So Mr. Gould, for the record, what is your position with Borough of Clifton Heights?
I'm the Chief Code Enforcement Officer, the Zoning Officer, and Emergency Management Coordinator.
And in connection with that, would it be your responsibility to issue use and occupancy certificates as well as review and approve or reject any applications for zoning and use certificates?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you have an occasion in the fall of 2021 to speak to Mr. and/or Mrs. Smalls regarding the subject properties?
That's correct.
And I approach, I have a series of documents that will identify. And I'll show you what we'll mark as Borough Exhibit 3 and Borough Exhibit 4, and ask if you can identify what those 2 documents are.
Do you have copies for Mr. Smalls?
I don't, but I'll show those to you.
clear that whole back area, you know?
Mhm.
Good, all the parking we need,
So,
pretty much.
at least more than he has. Because that's pretty deep. You could probably get 2 cars in there, 2 cars, 2 cars. Or if you have a box truck, you can get the truck in there.
So again, Mr. Gould, what I've identified as exhibits B3 and B4, can you tell the board what they are?
Sir, Exhibit B3 is a printout from Delaware County tax records for the property located at 911 East Baltimore Ave.
And I'll ask you, does it have a sale or transfer date on there?
Yes, it does. The sale date is indicated as December 27th, 2021.
And how about B4?
Exhibit B4 is the same printout from the Delaware County tax records for the property located at 1517 East Baltimore Avenue. And our deed date on that is listed as December 27th, 2021 as well.
And Mr. Chairman and Mr. Angelos, perhaps if, as we go along, we can pass these along.
Okay.
And then I'll show you what has been marked as Exhibit B5. Can you identify what that document is?
Yes, B5 is a zoning and planning letter that was written on December 7th, 2021 in response to zoning applications for 911 and 1517 East Baltimore Avenue.
And you and Mr. Smalls testified to it, but did you have conversations or meetings with Mr. Smalls regarding the use of the property prior to December 7th, 2021?
Prior to December 7th, I believe we met at the property for the use and occupancy inspection.
Okay. And was the use and occupancy inspection completed?
It was, yes.
And was there a report generated from that?
There was, yes.
And would that have been sent to Mr. Smalls?
Either him or his daughter, yes.
And did Mr. Smalls ultimately obtain a use and occupancy certificate at the time of transfer?
He did not.
And why was that?
There was applications made for a temporary certificate of occupancy for use only. They were not notarized. They were not notarized. We did not have a copy of his driver's license. So he was not reported that.
And was that application for a full use and occupancy or for a conditional use and occupancy because of the condition of the building?
It was conditional use and occupancy of the United sale for the property.
So he was purchasing the property as is. And under Pennsylvania law, is the purchaser in that situation with a conditional use and occupancy required to obtain a full use and occupancy within some time period after the conditional is issued?
Yes, that's correct.
And what is that time period?
I believe it to be 1 year.
And has Mr. Smalls obtained a use and occupancy certificate, whether conditional or full, since 2021?
He has not.
To this day?
No. There's no certification.
I will show you what's been marked as Exhibit B6, and I'll ask you if you can identify what that document is.
Yes, this is an inspection report I wrote on February 28th, 2022, and it states it was for a zoning / permit issue, which is hand delivered to a crew working at 911 Baltimore Avenue, and it states that their deck construction without approved zoning or building permits, stop work order, all construction activities must stop until permits and approvals are obtained. And I had signed it, was witnessed by Code Enforcement Officer Dennis English.
And I think Mr. Smalls had acknowledged, and we're certainly in a different place today than we were in the beginning of 2022, but would you agree that during the period of 2022 through the middle, at least, of 2023, there was multiple work that went on at these properties without applications for building permits or without any permission to do the work or without any inspections?
Yes, that's correct.
And again, what we'll mark as B7, and I want to just call attention, is this an email from Mr. Smalls dated February 18th, 2022, indicating that he was not going to get any permits or permission in order to do any of the work at the property.
That is correct.
And then B8, again, could you identify what that is?
B8 is a violation notice issued on March 21st of 2022 for 915 Baltimore Avenue. All work must stop immediately. Work cannot commence without proper zoning and approved permits. And this was issued by Dennis English, one of the code enforcement officers on the department.
And then what is marked as B9, can you identify what that document is?
Yes, this is a stop work order that was issued on March 25th, 2022 for the properties at 911 and 15 and 17 Baltimore Ave.
And did they stop work at that time?
I don't believe it.
And then we'll mark what's document B10. If you could identify what that document is.
This was in reference to a zoning application stating that the zoning application did not contain sufficient information for the zoning determination and asked for more information to be reviewed.
So during the course of these enforcement actions in February and March of 2022, Mr. Smalls actually attempted to make an application for zoning certificate.
Yes, sir.
But it was incomplete. And that's what Exhibit B9 is.
Correct.
Is that what I'm up to, Mr. Andrews?
B10.
B10, I'm sorry, that's what B10 is. And did he ever remedy that lack of information? Did he come in and provide what was required in order to consider it for zoning at that time?
Not for that particular application.
And then I'll show you B11, if you could identify what that is. B11 and B12 are similar.
These are notice of violations. This was written and issued on January 30th, 2023 for code violations at 911 East Baltimore Avenue.
So between the time of March of 2022 and January 2023, was there compliance, from the applicant in terms of getting permits, submitting the requested information?
There was none. And B12 is a violation notice with the same date, January 30th, 2023, for the property next to 15 to 17 East Baltimore Avenue.
And then B13, again, this is, I'll suggest to you an email from Mr. Small with some highlighted yellow language. Can you identify what that date is?
Sure. This was on September 20th, 2023.
And again, did that indicate that that Mr. Smalls was going to just simply proceed to occupy the properties without obtaining the required permissions or inspections, most importantly, from the borough?
It does, correct.
And then B14, if you could identify what that document is, if you know.
B14 is a document from the law offices of McNichol, Burnham, Pulaski, PC, dated September 20th, 2023, issued to Solid Rock Property Maintenance Management Group, Mr. and Mrs. Smalls. Notice of zoning violation, notice of cease and desist for the properties at 9 to 11 and 15 to 17 Baltimore Avenue.
And you received a copy of that letter contemporaneously with it being issued to Mr. and Mrs. Smalls?
That's correct.
And then in October, and let me ask you, during this time period from late 2021 through September of 2023, had we issued Mr. Smalls any citations?
At that point, I don't believe that.
And had we attempted on numerous occasions to notify Mr. Smalls what was necessary in order to walk through the zoning process and also walk through the inspection process?
Yes, sir.
And there were multiple different ideas that Mr. Smalls had for the use of these properties.
That's correct.
At one point, it was going to be a sit-down restaurant. At one point, it was going to be a sort of a health or gym facility.
I'm not sure about the gym facility, yes, with the restaurant. I believe there was another for an arcade or a party type venue.
an event venue, a hookah lounge, sports bar. All those were possible things that were discussed during all this time period. And is it correct that the borough was anxious to have somebody come in and deal with this property that had been vacant for 20 plus years?
Absolutely.
And is that the reason why we tried to continue to work with Mr. Smalls to get this done rather than just simply issue citations throughout the course of 2022 and 2023?
That's correct.
But then after those efforts failed, did we finally issue citations in October of 2020?
That's correct.
And is it correct that we've only issued 2 citations?
Correct. On 6 properties for that is looking at use occupancy.
So for that year that he was required to get the use and occupancy certificate after he first purchased it, that's the only citations that we've issued.
Correct.
And those are still pending in the district court, is that correct? Now, I'll show you what we're up to be.
415.
315. And indicate this is an email from Mr. Smalls of January 8th, 2024, where he suggests a couple of suggested uses for the property. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
And is it correct that he basically identifies 2 options in that correspondence? Option 1 is basically the same thing as what is presented here tonight, that he would use 9 East Baltimore as commercial space, 11 East Baltimore as residential space, 15 East Baltimore as commercial space, and 17 East Baltimore as residential space.
Correct.
But he says in there, if option 1, if he doesn't get what he's asking for in option 1, option 2 would be for it to be used as all commercial space in accordance with the code.
Correct.
Mr. Smalls, you saw all 15 of those exhibits? Mr. Blanchard, okay, just want to make sure you saw copies of them.
And Mr. Gould, in terms of the residential properties, were you able to examine the borough records to make a determination about when the borough last permitted the legal use of any of these properties for residential use?
I did look in the records and there was no mention of the residential properties in the records.
And you indicated you had a conversation with the previous owner of the property.
Correct.
And based upon that conversation, I don't want you to tell me what he said, but based upon that conversation, have you come to some conclusion about when you believe the last time any of these properties were used for residential purposes legally?
They have not been occupied since 2018 legally. At that point, I can't speak to before that, but I know since I started in 2018, there was no legal occupancy on both the residences.
Do you know how long they were vacant prior to 2018?
I don't. I know the owner did speak that they were vacant, and we sent him a correspondence. He did indicate that the properties were vacant.
And do you know, based upon the records, have we issued any use and occupancy certificates for any one of these properties for at least 20 years?
Not to my knowledge.
And you've been able to take a look at the borough's records relating to both of these properties?
Yes, that's correct.
And in this area, this is zoned commercial, which does not allow for residential by right.
Correct.
Has the borough made efforts at redevelopment of its downtown areas and especially the corridors along Baltimore Pike and Springfield Avenue as it pertains to sort of the old storefront commercial properties?
Yes.
And in fact, a little bit further down the street, there are several developments, for the self-storage, for the Lidl supermarket that have occurred within these recent years. And in fact, one's being constructed right now, known as the R2K at the former Hillside property.
Correct.
And those are all commercial uses.
They are.
And when it has come up to the borough, the suggestion that to use these commercial storefronts as residential apartments or, have those been approved by the borough during your tenure here?
They have not.
And in fact, at least several of those have gone before this zoning hearing board, and the borough has opposed the use of residential use in the commercial storefront areas.
That's correct.
And in these couple of blocks from Springfield Road, down, were you able to take a look to see whether the commercial properties were vacant or whether they were occupied?
It depends on the time. At certain points when I first started, they were vacant, many of which have been occupied now with businesses.
So what was a problem with vacant properties, the borough's efforts and other improvements, now we have occupied commercial properties in this storefront area.
Correct.
And just today, you and I spoke, and did you sort of take a look or do an inventory about, in these first couple of blocks off of Baltimore Ave or off of Springfield Road on Baltimore Avenue to determine whether or not there's existing vacancies?
I did, and on the unit block, which is shown here, there are up to Walnut Street here, there are no vacancies. The second block, there are a couple of storefronts that right now we have permits for renovations on the existing storefronts that are vacant at this time.
But they're being renovated for other use.
Correct, for commercial rental space, correct.
And in terms of parking, have you been able to calculate what the required parking would be for the desired uses as expressed by Mr. or Mrs. Smalls?
I did. Bear with me 1 second, I'll find my letter here. So for 9 to 11 East Baltimore, for the proposed use as professional office, the zoning code states for offices and banks that 5 parking spaces are required per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area.
Do we know how many gross feet of square floor area there is?
I don't.
We haven't, that's information that we have requested from the applicants.
We have, I believe there is an existing write-up from Damon Engineers showing existing conditions of the property.
Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it in here, I will have to double check on that.
And then for the 15 East Baltimore commercial space, have you been able to calculate what that would require for parking?
I have. Unfortunately, no, I did not on 15 and 17, as the use was not a use by right.
Okay.
That first use was not a use by right, so there was no parking calculations came up.
Okay. So we don't know as of yet, depending on what a use is. And we're not being asked to decide a use variance here this evening, correct?
Correct.
In addition to parking, does the code require any sort of off-street loading space that would be required for any of the commercial uses here?
Yes, it does.
And what is that requirement?
Bear with me 1 second, please. Unfortunately, I do not have that right in front of me.
If it's easier, I could refer you to you wrote reviews of the applications for a zoning certificate in February and again in May. Do you have those in front of you there?
I do not.
Can you bear with me just a moment, Mr. Chairman, while I
Sure.
get that for you?
Okay. Well,
Yes?
You actually may, once he's done,
Oh,
you,
okay.
you can, you'll get a chance to ask,
Yeah.
the zoning officer questions. I have just one clarification. You said there wasn't a use variance being asked for in connection with 15 through 17. We I believe part of 17, it was correct, was proposed to be used as residential.
Yeah.
And then the notice says that there is a request for a party equipment rental office space. And Mr. McBlain, what you're saying is that there wasn't an actual use variance asked for in connection with that. Is that what you said?
Other than they're asking, I believe, for the residential use, variance to obtain residential use in the commercial district, but they're not asking for use variances for the described commercial uses, for the professional office space, which I think Mr. Gould testified is actually is
It's
permitted.
permitted, right. I just want to make sure that was okay.
And then it's changed, but for the 15, which my examination from Mr. Smalls, he indicated the current proposal would be to use it for the party equipment rental.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that was a determination made, on that.
Yeah, whether it's permitted or not.
Right.
If I could approach,
I did just find I apologize, I did just find the off-street loading and unloading requirements.
Okay.
This is in a zoning letter dated May 6th, 2024.
And this would be a letter that would sent to Mr. and Mrs. Smalls.
Correct, this was a zoning review from the initial application for 15.
And did it indicate in there that there would be a requirement for off-street loading?
It did. So the property also lacks required off-street loading and unloading requirements per section 34069 and 340-70, which states that required loading spaces based on the use. Retail, business, and service establishments require one space for the first 5,000 square feet and one next space for the next 7,500 square feet. And then that jumps up to another space when it gets to 15,000 square feet. Industrial uses, total floor area for the first space is 15,000 square feet. An additional space is required when it gets to 25,000 square feet, an additional space for 40,000 square feet.
So that would add to the parking, in addition to the off-street parking, there's this off-street loading,
Correct.
such as what we just talked about for the equipment rental. That would be required also.
Correct.
And is there also any requirement under zoning ordinance for any buffering from a residential area where you have commercial abutting a residential area?
Yes, there's a screening and setbacks requirements that are required for that.
And what are those screening and setback requirements?
All such parking areas and loading areas shall be at least 5 foot from any lot line and at least 10 feet from any street right of way. All parking areas containing 10 or more parking spaces and all loading areas shall be screened from adjacent areas which are zoned for residential purposes in the following manner. A landscaped area of at least 5 feet in width with plants suitable to attain maximum height of 6 feet within 3 growing seasons, or an opaque fence, excluding a chain link type fence, or at least 3 feet high in height. Such screening shall be provided in such a way that a clear view is continuously restricted from adjacent areas. Section B, within 10 feet of street right of way, screening shall be provided and shall be not greater than 3 feet in height. Subsection C, one shade tree shall be planted within or adjacent to the parking area for each parking area where the 10 parking spaces provided. Subsection D, all such parking areas and loading areas shall be designed in such a way that motor vehicles are not permitted to back into a public street.
Do we have any plan from the applicant that would show any sort of the buffering that is required, or any proposal for even something lesser than what's required?
No, I haven't.
And Mr. Chairman, I just have, I think, one more
Yes,
question, but if I
sure.
could retrieve, I think what was exhibit, borough exhibit number 3. I'm sorry. Borough exhibit number 5.
Okay.
If I can approach Mr. Gould. Mr. Gould, if you recall that borough exhibit number 5, you identified as your December 7th, 2021 letter to Mr. Smalls with all the list based upon what he was talking about using it for, all the relief and the restrictions that would be on the property. And as you remember, this went out on December 7th, which was several weeks before the property actually transferred, correct?
Correct.
And on here, I'll point you to page 3, where it references section 340-100 discontinuance. And what did you inform Mr. Smalls at the time in that letter in December of 2021?
The property's been vacant for several years. The residential uses of the properties are not a use by right in the C1 zoning district. Non-conforming residential uses were discontinued for more than a year. The use of the properties must be brought in conformance with the C1 zoning district, where you may seek a special exception regarding changes to non-conforming uses for section 340-97. Seeking conditional use or a variance from any of these provisions would require submitting environmental impact report and traffic study for section 340-90 and 90.1. And then I cited 340-100 discontinuance. Whenever a non-conforming use of land, premises, buildings, or structures, or any part thereof has been discontinued for a period of 1 year or more, such non-conforming use shall not be reestablished thereafter, and all future uses shall be in conformity with the provisions of this chapter.
Thank you. And that's all the questions I have for Mr. Gould.
Okay. Now, would it be time for Mrs. Small to talk?
Yes, if Mr.
Okay,
Small
Mrs.
says any
Small, do
questions.
you have some
Mr. Gould.
questions?
Yes, I do. So in regards, it is our understanding that the existing parking lot belongs to the borough, correct?
The-
The one that's in the back of the building.
That is a borough parking lot. You're talking the big square one that's
Correct.
there, yes.
Correct.
That's a
So, Ms.
borough-
Smalls,
Yes.
Yeah.
for procedural purposes, technically the board can't answer any questions. If you have questions of the witness, who's the zoning officer, please, you can,
Direct it.
yeah, direct
Okay,
it.
gotcha.
Yep.
I understand. So the property, parking lot belongs to the borough.
Yes,
Correct.
correct, as shown on the screen, correct.
All right. So then is it my understanding that the borough is the one that gets to determine who gets to park there, or how the parking spaces are allocated to the businesses in the area?
Yes, that'd be correct.
So with the current businesses that are there right now, has the parking space exceeded parking? Because I just need to know from my understanding.
Can you repeat the question?
With the current businesses that are in that corridor, right? Has the parking spaces been exceeded as far as allowing any additional parking to be used for some of what we're proposing?
No, typically when I go through during my rounds for the day, there's typically open spaces in the lot.
Right.
It's approximately anywhere from half to 3/4 full.
Okay. And please, I'm just trying to get a understanding, because at this point, we need to move forward. You guys all know how long this whole process has been going on, and we need to move this along. The reason I'm asking is because if there is a chance for any of those parking spaces to be designated to us, I don't care what we have to do at this point. If we have to buy spaces from the board, like whatever it takes for us to be able to do what needs to be done, that's what we're willing to do. The other part I was wondering is, and I'm like he said, we live in the neighborhood. We see vehicles that are parked there from sun up to sundown. It has not moved. So I'm just wondering how it is that they are allowed to permanently park there when we're having this discussion about parking.
Can I ask a question? Is, and these spots, any of these, are they allotted to any of the residents? Or are they to the public, all of them to the public?
The police department handles the permitting of it, so on both questions, I would have to defer to our police department.
How many, all right, how many in, as you can see, excuse me, I'm sorry, but are these belong to the borough? Those?
They do.
Okay. These belong to these residents, correct?
No, they belong to the borough as well.
This is, okay. And how many spots are there?
Looking at approximately 40,
40?
approximately.
Thank you.
And for the record, I believe we're discussing exhibit B2.
And you don't know how many are calculated, I'm sorry, to the residents for their parkings?
I don't.
Okay. And it's, when the residents are allotted those spots, is it a yearly? Is it like,
That I don't know.
okay, sorry. I a little confused
I
there.
do have one other question. When the pre-inspection was done, John, it was not stated, and I know for legal purposes, you probably couldn't tell us that there were violations on it, which is why when we went to closing and they did the title search and they went to media, there was nothing on record that stated that there was any violations on this property. I assure you, if that was the case, we would not have purchased the building at the price that we purchased it for. We would have renegotiated that, knowing that there was tons of violations on there. We didn't get the violations until we actually closed, and that was like a week or so later. When it finally closed, then we get the notice saying, hey, there's X, Y, and Z on there. So as I'm like, hey, where did this all come from? I made a couple irrational moves, right? A lot of it is out of frustration. It was out of frustration. Because now you have a mountain of these violations, and I'm looking at this building as we go through it, step by step. There was problems. Like, we couldn't see the problems until we actually started taking up things. So when we actually started going through the one that is, where you see kind of ladders inside the building, you couldn't see the right underneath the floor until you actually started taking the floor up. When you took that up, it was a problem. And you can't even begin to see the landscape of it until you actually fix the problem. So there was a bunch of things. We poured a lot into it. And I hear you on one side where you're saying that there wasn't, whenever I hired a contractor, I assumed that the responsibility is on the contractor to pull the permit. Now, the one, as you see that group that's actually doing that work, they actually did come back because I had to wind up calling the insurance company to get them and the borough on the insurance before they could actually be able to issue or do work there. So then they wound up doing what they needed to do. Again, I take responsibility because I should have been checking to make sure that everybody did their due diligence and pulled the permits that they needed to pull. I dropped the ball on that. The end game for me is, and for us, is to make sure that this building does not get torn down and there's a hole in the middle of the block. I don't think nobody in Clifton Heights wants that. I've been here long enough, as you guys have probably been here longer than we have. That is a beautiful building. It just needs love. So, whatever your decision tonight, it is, we understand. As my wife said, like, we just have to move on to wherever the next chapter is for us.
Mr. Small, when you said that there was previous violations, are you saying that the previous owner had the violations that you inherited?
Yes. And
that never went through a title search?
When the title company did the search, there was nothing. There was nothing that came up. The violations did not enter or surface until we actually closed. And a week or so later is when the violations came to us in the mail. And that's where I was like, well, how did that even happen? Now, could it have been the communication between our realtor and their attorney? I have no idea. I don't know how that was missed. I don't know. But I can assure you that that deal would not have closed if we would have known that up front.
Were the violations from the borough or were they from the county?
My understanding was from the borough.
I'm going to suggest that the violations that you're speaking of was when Mr. Gould testified that he sent out the inspection report. Mr. Smalls testified that he did not obtain the use and occupancy transfer certificate prior to the time that he purchased the property. There was an application made, and there was an inspection that was completed, and Mr. Gould testified that he sent the inspection report out. The inspection report would have things that need to be remedied before the property could be occupied. I believe that's probably what he's referring to, but there were no violations in terms of citations or anything like that to this property prior to the time that Mr. Smalls purchased it, because it was a vacant property for 20 plus years. So there wasn't anything ongoing there. I think what he's referring to is the use and occupancy report that went out, yes, after he obtained the deed to it, but the whole idea is if you would comply with the law, you get the UNO before the settlement so that you can see what needs to be done for the property.
There was a notice that was sent to Mr. Hayes, the previous owner, and his family owned it. The picture I brought up was October 2018. I started in April 2018. One of the big things I did at that point was identifying vacant underperforming properties. You can see the condition at that point. A letter was sent to Mr. Hayes, who did respond quickly. And the facade, as you can see in this picture, was cleaned up. The house was painted. This old former signage that you can see in this picture was removed. They were covered over. The house was painted, and he did register. He did obtain 2 vacant property registrations for the property. He had no intention of using it to get the property up in the market, but the violations that were issued before were for the exterior damage to the property and for not having a vacant property registration.
I'm sorry, it's not a shot at the borough. What I'm saying is, in that disclosure statement that we sat down at that closing document, it should have been disclosed that that Mr. Hayes vacated the property, which means he would abandon use. So that should have actually been stated in the actual disclosure, because if that was actually stated in the disclosure, we would not have moved forward at the price that we bought it at, because that means we have no use to it. If we would have known that from the very beginning, we would not have moved on this project, and it would have been a standstill, and that should have been disclosed. That's John. That's not it wasn't targeted to you. It was that when we went to closing, that was not disclosed to us that he vacated the premises and that the immediate use was abandoned.
So the violations you're speaking of, maybe as Mr. McBlain indicated, but also that you didn't understand how the property was being used and when it was abandoned. So those violations are zoning violations, meaning the property wasn't used properly.
Right.
And then can we, just as a suggestion, school it showed 2 more pictures. It might be a good idea to maybe add them as borough exhibits. I think we're up to 16 and 17.
The pictures being the 2018 pictures from Google Earth.
And then what was the second one you had of the?
It was August of
Was August. Okay. If we could have both of those as 16 and 17, that'd be appreciated. Mr. Schmalz, any further questions for Mr. Gold? Mr. McBlain, any redirect?
No.
So, Mr. McBlain, do you have any other witnesses presentation?
No, borough has nothing further. We would just move for the entry of exhibits B1 through B17.
Okay. Mr. Schmalz, any objection?
All right. It'll be, okay, we are.
So at this point, that I would say that the record is not closed completely, but closed as it is to the applicant's case in chief, unless you had anything further you would like to add in response to anything Mr. McLean had mentioned.
Okay.
And then the borough's rested. At this point, I would suggest if there's any public comment, the board accept public comment from anybody in the residence.
All right, is there any public comment on this matter? Being none,
So at this point, I would say the record is closed.
the record is closed, and
Does the board want to go into a brief recess to
Yes,
I
determine
think
whether?
so. I was ready to say
Yeah.
that, have a brief recess. into
And
the back.
we can discuss whether or not the board thinks it could render a decision this evening,
Mhm.
or if it feels like it wants to take this matter under advisement, at which point it would render a decision, could render a decision. I don't know if you guys have a regular scheduled meetings every month, but we would have approximately 45 days to issue a decision.
Okay, so we could make a decision tonight, or we.
Or we would, yeah, we'd have to
Go up to 45 days.
Yeah, and then
All right,
schedule a new matter just for purposes of rendering a decision that evening.
okay. I'd like to entertain that we take a recess. Would that, any objections?
No.
No, all right.
Just ask everybody to
let's
shut off
take
their microphones while we're in recess, please.
it. Mhm.
Mike's on.
Okay. I'm going to let the borough solicitor, or the solicitor on the panel to go and, announce our decision
All
there.
right, so we are back on the record for purposes of this June 25th meeting in connection with the application of Dwayne Smalls, property at 15 through 17 East Baltimore Pike and 9 through 11 East Baltimore Pike in Clifton. The board took a brief recess to discuss with me the exhibits and evidence presented this evening as it is permitted as a quasi-judicial body. At this point, the board would like to take further consideration and review the evidence and testimony permitted. So it would like to take this under advisement, not render a decision this evening. It would schedule a meeting at 7 o'clock in this building on July 30th for a decision. Because we're notifying this in public, there will be no additional postings or advertisement in this. So make sure you have it in your calendars. But the board's going to take it under advisement. The matter will be continued to July 30th, at which point it will render a decision at that time.
Thank
you. At this point, with no other further business, administrative or anything along those lines, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, you can move to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn, somebody.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion,
Accept.
second, okay, all those in favor?
Second,
Aye.
yes, aye.
Meeting closed. All right, this is mine, that stays there.